The moment the waitress was offered $50,000 to destroy her best friend's life, she revealed a secret identity that shattered the billionaire's entire perception of integrity. Before we dive into the story, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment where in the world you are watching from. The bustling energy of the Onyx Bistro pulsed under the glow of polished steel and warm lighting, a scene of choreographed chaos that only a professional like Maya Vance could manage with ease. She moved through the dining room, a study in quiet efficiency, her simple black uniform concealing a mind that worked with the speed and precision of a complex algorithm. Tonight, the pressure was higher than usual, and as Maya swiftly covered a six-top table, she saw her best friend Chloe struggling. Chloe, sweet and earnest but naturally clumsy, nearly sent a tray of empty champagne flutes crashing to the floor. Maya, without breaking stride, intercepted the tray with one hand, a silent, almost invisible rescue. "Easy, Chloe," Maya murmured, her voice a calm anchor in the storm of the dinner rush. Chloe exhaled a shaky breath, whispering, "Thanks, May." "I owe you one." Maya just shook her head, a hint of a smile touching her lips before her features locked back into the smooth composure of an expert server. Moments later, the smooth veneer of the night was shattered by the shrill, demanding voice of the restaurant manager, Marcus. He stood near the kitchen pass, his face flushed and his expensive tie askew, leveling a stream of abuse at Chloe for forgetting to chill a specific bottle of Chardonnay. Marcus was a tyrant fueled by insecurity, and tonight he was tasting blood. "Are you deaf, Vance? That bottle is 15 degrees too warm. You're costing this establishment its reputation." He snarled, oblivious to the fact that it had been Chloe's task, not Maya's. Maya paused, resting her hands on the edge of her tray, her body language shifting subtly from service worker to something colder, more authoritative. Her eyes, usually warm, went momentarily flat as she dissected Marcus's outburst. "Mr. Marcus," she corrected gently, pronouncing the name as if she were addressing a toddler, "the correct cooling temperature for this vintage is precisely 49 degrees Fahrenheit. It is currently at 51. Your overreaction to a 2-degree variance, while understandable given your stress levels, is actively intimidating your staff, leading to a demonstrable drop in efficiency. Please allow us to handle the wine. You handle your emotions." The words, spoken softly but with an undeniable psychological precision, caused Marcus to stutter. His brain, unable to process the combination of deference and surgical critique, short-circuited. He looked flustered, then furious, then simply confused, sputtering, Just get back to work, Vance." The tension eased, and Maya's features softened back into placidity. Her quick, sharp defense of Chloe, devoid of anger but packed with intellectual dominance, was a brief, potent glimpse into the mind of the woman she used to be, a mind that was definitely not meant for serving wine. Just as the rhythm of the room began to settle, the street outside erupted into a cacophony of sirens and horns. The bistro's front windows were suddenly eclipsed by the imposing shadows of multiple black sport utility vehicles and sleek limousines. Marcus, forgetting his anger entirely, scrambled to straighten his tie. The door opened and the maitre d', pale and sweating, announced to the stunned room, Julian Thorne, Chief Executive Officer of Aureus Global, had arrived. Marcus, eyes wide with terror and excitement, rushed forward. The restaurant, he announced to the staff in a breathless whisper, had been entirely bought out for the night for a private party. The atmosphere in the Onyx Bistro shifted instantly from a high-energy service environment to a sterile corporate testing ground the moment Julian Thorne took his seat. He was all sharp angles and tailored darkness, commanding attention without saying a word. His presence alone created a palpable tension that circulated among the servers like an electric current. Julian didn't look at the expensive appetizers or the vintage wine list. His dark, analytical eyes were fixed on the staff, tracking their movements, assessing their efficiency. He seemed less like a diner and more like a behavioral psychologist observing lab rats. Maya felt the scrutiny like a physical weight, but years of training allowed her to maintain a facade of serene competence. She was aware of every flicker of his gaze, every micro-expression on his unreadable face. The air grew thick with silent pressure, causing the less experienced servers to visibly falter. And then, the inevitable happened. Under the intensity of Julian's unflinching gaze, poor Chloe, already rattled by Marcus, made a grave mistake. Rushing to retrieve a fresh glass, her heel caught on a misplaced floor mat. Her tray, loaded with sparkling water, ice, and several high-end coupes, went airborne. In a slow-motion catastrophe, a splash of water and ice scattered across the immaculate tile, and worst of all, a torrent of icy water soaked the trousers of a high-profile guest seated near Julian's table. Before the guest could even shout, Marcus, seeking redemption for his earlier flustering, rushed over, his face contorted into a mask of theatrical fury. "You clumsy idiot. That's it, you're finished. Out. Get out of my restaurant," he shrieked, seizing Chloe's arm to physically drag her away. Chloe was sobbing, a broken pile of apologies and shame. Julian Thorne, who had watched the entire episode with unnerving stillness, finally moved. He raised a single hand, the gesture minute but powerful enough to halt Marcus mid-tirade. The entire restaurant froze. Julian turned to Marcus, his voice a low, perfectly controlled baritone that somehow cut through the silence. "Manager," he said, using the title like an accusation, "if you fire her now, the entire scene ends with unnecessary drama and a potential lawsuit. Let's not be predictable. Let's make this interesting." Marcus, deflated but still trembling with ambition, backed down immediately, recognizing the order in the CEO's tone. Julian then fixed his penetrating stare on Maya. He hadn't spoken to her, hadn't even acknowledged her name, but his eyes were on her, waiting for a reaction. His gaze was a silent, direct command. Julian Thorne's hand lifted, a single, definitive gesture that cut the tension in the Onyx bistro. "You," he commanded, his eyes fixed on Maya Vance. The focus of his scrutiny was absolute, drawing her away from the frantic cleanup and the sobbing Chloe. Maya straightened, meeting his gaze with the same unreadable composure she had displayed when challenging Mr. Marcus. She approached the Billionaire's table, the expensive wood and polished silver, a stark contrast to her humble service uniform. "Yes, Mr. Thorne?" she asked, her voice steady. He gestured to the empty seat beside him. "Sit." It wasn't a request, it was a command that broke every rule of the bistro. Maya hesitated for just a moment, calculating the ripple effect of the move, before she smoothly pulled out the chair and sat. Julian poured a glass of rare Bordeaux wine far beyond her server's wages and slid it toward her. "Drink it," he said, watching her reaction. Maya simply looked at the deep red liquid, her expression unchanged. He didn't wait for her to sip. "Why are you here, Maya Vance?" The question was a scalpel, cutting through the pretense. "You move with the economy of a systems analyst. Your verbal de-escalation of the manager was textbook, and you just covered a 6-top faster than anyone in this room. You are demonstrably overqualified for serving lukewarm coffee." Maya took a slow, deliberate breath. "I'm paying bills, Mr. Thorne." "It's honest work. Honest work doesn't require the mental acuity of a corporate crisis manager," he countered, his eyes narrowed. "I've run background checks on less impressive people. Tell me the truth." The silence stretched, filled only by the distant clatter from the kitchen. Maya kept her gaze level. "The truth is, my employment history is confidential." Julian smiled then, a slight chilling tilt of the lips that held no warmth. A compelling answer. He didn't press further, but the question hung in the air. What is she hiding? Suddenly, the mood shifted. Julian stood, not demanding, but stating a problem. My party requires an unscheduled course within the next 15 minutes, but the kitchen is currently operating at 70% capacity due to the manager's incompetence. He looked at the frantic chefs, then at Maya. Solve it. It was an impromptu performance review. Maya didn't hesitate. She barked 3 concise, rapid orders at the nearest 2 sous chefs and 1 runner instructions that reorganized the entire workflow and streamlined the plating process. She didn't touch a pan, but within 10 minutes, the kitchen staff was moving with synchronized, furious efficiency. The unscheduled course was plated and served with 5 minutes to spare. Julian watched the entire performance, his analytical gaze never leaving her, absorbing the competence that radiated from her every move. He then turned back to Maya, his eyes now holding a predatory gleam. "Satisfactory," he murmured, his voice laced with sudden intense interest. Julian Thorne's gaze held a mixture of calculated admiration and ruthless intent. He slid a sleek, custom Aureus Global checkbook across the table, his movements deliberate. From it he tore a pre-signed check and filled in the amount, $50,000. He slid the completed check across the pristine white linen, the bold black text, a stark contract to the humble restaurant setting. The sum represented more than Maya Vance made in 2 full years of waiting tables at the Onyx Bistro. "This is your price, Maya," Julian stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "It's not for your service, it's for your loyalty, or lack thereof." Maya didn't touch the check, she didn't even lean in. She knew the game had arrived. Julian continued, his eyes unwavering. "Your friend Chloe is a liability. She's clumsy, easily intimidated, and she's a drain on the staff's efficiency. She is a weak link, and weak links break the chain. I want you to walk out there right now, in front of my guests, and fire her, effective immediately. You use the exact psychological precision you used on Mr. Marcus. Tell her she's a risk, a distraction, and she is no longer welcome. Do that, and the $50,000 is yours, no strings attached." The proposition hung in the air, cold and heavy. Maya finally looked down at the check, the number glowing under the recessed lighting. She allowed herself a moment to process what that money meant, paying off her parents' outstanding medical debts, clearing her own debt, and finally affording the anonymity she craved. It was a golden key to a locked door, but the moment passed, replaced by a steely resolve that Julian had only glimpsed before. She looked up, her eyes meeting his directly, the vulnerability gone. "Loyalty isn't a commodity, Mr. Thorne," Maya said, her voice dropping, growing hard like granite. "It isn't a variable you calculate into your quarterly projections. It is a value system." She paused, her hands flat on the table, pushing her coffee cup slightly back. She analyzed him as if he were a particularly difficult behavioral case study. "You, Mr. Thorne, are testing me, but you're running a flawed test. True leadership isn't about identifying and culling the weak. It's about recognizing potential and investing in the infrastructure that allows them to thrive. Chloe is afraid of Mr. Marcus, not of the work. You want to see if I'll destroy the one loyal relationship I have for financial gain. You want to confirm your own cynical worldview that everyone has a price. But I'm not buying your premise, and I'm certainly not selling my friend." Her hand reached out, not for the pen or the check, but for the checkbook still on the table. With a swift, fluid motion, she picked up the $50,000 check and, with surgical precision, tore it neatly into 4 equal pieces. The sound of the ripping paper was the loudest noise in the silent bistro. She placed the pieces back down on the table, right where Julian could see them. "Keep your money, Mr. Thorne." "Loyalty isn't for sale." Julian's face, for the first time that night, flickered. It wasn't anger. It was a profound, unsettling surprise, followed by a glint of recognition. "I've seen that kind of defiance before," he murmured, his gaze narrowing intensely. "That brand of stubborn integrity." He trailed off, pulling out his phone, his mind clearly working through new, highly specific data points. Julian Thorne didn't move as the pieces of the $50,000 check settled on the table. His silence was not defeat. It was the quiet of a highly sophisticated machine receiving unexpected input. His lips curled into a faint, complex expression that was not quite a smile, but definitely not disappointment. "A fascinating response, Maya Vance," he finally murmured, leaning back. "A brand of stubborn integrity that seems familiar. Not many people walk away from life-altering capital to protect someone they manage." Maya stood, retrieving her composure along with her apron. "I manage the environment, Mr. Thorne, not the people in it. The people are my friends." She looked pointedly at the shattered check. "And I've already told you, the one thing money can't buy is a clean conscience." Julian's gaze narrowed. "A clean conscience comes at a steep price, doesn't it? Tell me, was that why you vanished from Sterling Corporation 2 years ago? The conscience got too heavy?" He had found the loose thread. Maya's composure momentarily cracked, the mention of her past job like a physical blow. She smoothly turned away, using the need to check on the remaining diners as an excuse to escape his predatory analysis. "Excuse me, Mr. Thorne, but my shift isn't over." The moment she was out of sight, Mr. Marcus appeared, having observed the exchange from the kitchen door. His eyes, usually clouded with incompetence, were sharp with calculation. He hadn't heard the full conversation, but he had seen the torn check and the billionaire's intense focus on Maya. He knew Maya Vance was a threat to his precarious authority and his aspirations for promotion. He approached Julian's table with a practiced, oily sincerity. "Mr. Thorne, I apologize for my previous outburst. I can assure you that Chloe will be dealt with immediately. As for Vance, she's become unstable. Clearly, she's lost her mind. Refusing $50,000, it speaks to a deeper psychological issue, perhaps residual stress from her past employment. I'll make sure her file is ready for your review, emphasizing her erratic behavior and poor judgment." Julian listened, his face impassive, merely nodding once. Marcus took the nod as approval, his anxiety turning into aggressive self-preservation. If Julian Thorne wanted a weak link gone, Marcus would deliver a weak link and use the opportunity to eliminate his own rival. Marcus slipped away from the dining room and into the small, cramped employee locker area in the basement. He went straight to Chloe's unlocked, worn metal locker. His fingers, guided by malice, pulled out a spare, extremely rare bottle of 50-year-old Vesper Reserve wine, a bottle meant for Julian Thorne's party, now marked as missing in the inventory, and slipped it into Chloe's oversized shoulder bag, pushing it deep beneath her sweater and scarf. "Unstable, is she?" Marcus thought with a vicious smile. "Let's see how smart Miss Vance is when her best friend is facing a police report for grand theft." He pulled out his phone and sent a coded message to the head of security, signaling the need for an immediate routine inventory check of the employee belongings before staff departure. The net was closing, and Maya Vance was about to face a problem she couldn't solve with just quick thinking or a clever rebuttal. The private party was breaking up, and the lingering tension in the Onyx Bistro was palpable. As the wealthy guests began to file out, Mr. Marcus stepped forward, his expression now a chilling blend of faux concern and rigid authority. He intercepted the remaining servers near the exit, his voice booming just loud enough to be heard by Julian Thorne, who was deliberately taking his time by the reservation podium. "Wait," Marcus announced, holding up his hand. "Due to recent inventory concerns, we are instituting a mandatory and immediate security check of all personal belongings before any staff members leave the premises." "It's routine, of course." Maya Vance immediately stiffened. This was not routine. This was an ambush, a desperate act of self-preservation triggered by Julian's earlier command. She looked across the room at Julian, who remained impassive, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes narrowed in observation. He was waiting. Chloe, already emotionally shattered from the earlier reprimand and the day's stress, started to tremble. "Mr. Marcus, I haven't taken anything, I swear." She stammered, tears welling up again. "I just want to go home." Marcus waved a dismissive hand, focusing his theatrics entirely on her. "Of course, Vance, we're just being thorough. Now, open your bag." Maya stepped forward instantly, shielding Chloe. "Chloe, wait." "Mr. Marcus, a random security check without prior notification or probable cause is not policy, and it certainly violates several clauses in our employee handbook, which I happen to know by heart. If you want to proceed, you need to state the specific reason and the suspected item." Marcus, realizing he couldn't intimidate Maya with jargon, snapped, "Fine. We are missing a bottle of 50-year-old Vesper Reserve wine, valued at over $5,000, and I have reason to suspect your friend's carelessness extends to theft." He then theatrically reached into Chloe's oversized shoulder bag, digging deep past her personal items. For a suspended, breathless moment, the entire dining room, including the few remaining high-status guests, and the CEO, Julian Thorne, watched. Marcus's face broke into a triumphant, ugly sneer as his fingers closed around the familiar shape of a wine bottle. He pulled it out with a flourish. "Aha, see, grand theft," he declared, holding the bottle aloft. Chloe gasped, her knees nearly giving out as she stared at the evidence, her face drained of all color. I don't know how that got there. I didn't," she pleaded, hyperventilating. Marcus quickly pulled out his phone. "Silence, criminal. I am calling the city police department right now. Theft of this magnitude will land you in jail and ruin any future employment." He held the phone up, dialing. The threat was immediate, terrifying, and seemingly insurmountable. This was no longer just about a job. It was about Chloe's freedom and future. Julian Thorne watched the entire scene, his analytical gaze never leaving Maya. He was waiting to see if she would finally break under the real pressure. The siren song of Mr. Marcus's phone dialing the city police department was the trigger that finally snapped Maya Vance out of her carefully constructed anonymity. Chloe's terrified sobs filled the stunned silence, and Julian Thorne watched his face a mask of cold anticipation, waiting for the climax of his real-world experiment. Maya moved. Her posture, previously that of a calm server, transformed into the rigid, economical stance of a seasoned professional ready for combat. The shift was absolute, terrifyingly competent. She snatched Marcus's hand, the one holding the phone, not violently but with a precise, immobilizing grip. "Stop," she commanded, her voice low, penetrating, and utterly devoid of the warmth she usually reserved for Chloe. "You won't be calling anyone, Mr. Marcus." Marcus, stunned by the physical restraint and the sheer dominance in her voice, struggled. "Let go of me, you lunatic." "She's a thief. I have the evidence right here." He gestured wildly at the $5,000 to $1,000 bottle of Vesper Reserve wine he held. Maya ignored him, her focus entirely on the bottle. A $5,000 bottle of wine, you say? Her eyes scanned the bottle, then Marcus, then the area around Chloe's locker. She wasn't guessing. She was performing a rapid, real-time forensic assessment. Interesting. The label is clean, but the top of the cork is marked with a faint, oily smudge. The seal is intact, confirming it was not Chloe who placed it in the bag, because Chloe has no reason to touch the cork. She then moved with lightning speed, pulling Marcus's hand toward the light, exposing the cuff of his expensive shirt. And here, she continued, her voice gaining momentum and icy contempt, is where the real evidence lies. A faint, almost invisible splash of red wine on your cuff, exactly matching the vintage currently listed as missing in inventory. Marcus went visibly pale, sweat instantly beading on his forehead. Accusations without proof are meaningless, Vance. I was serving all night. Not quite, Marcus. Maya countered, pressing her advantage. I logged your movements. You were in the back office, away from the floor, for 7 minutes precisely 20 minutes ago. Long enough to access the secure cellar and plant the bottle. You wanted to impress Mr. Thorne by eliminating a weak link, and you wanted to eliminate your most competent rival by framing her for a crime you yourself orchestrated. The atmosphere in the Onyx Bistro was now electric, the remaining patrons leaning forward, forgetting their status and their wine. Maya wasn't done. She pointed toward the windows, where the reflected light from the street lamps hit the glass. Furthermore, the security camera log will show you standing precisely where you are now, Mr. Marcus, when you performed the check, but the reflective angle in the window will show you clearly placing the bottle in Chloe's bag moments before you announced the check was taking place. She paused, allowing the weight of the evidence to sink in, then delivered the killing blow. And, just in case Mr. Thorne needs more data, I can provide a full, itemized breakdown of the $300 you have skimmed from the staff's tip pool over the past 2 months, thanks to my own little mental audit of the bistro's digital receipts. Now, who is the criminal, Marcus? Marcus didn't speak. He merely trembled, defeated, his calculated act of sabotage having backfired with catastrophic results. His eyes darted past Maya, seeking salvation from Julian Thorne, but Julian wasn't looking at Marcus. He was looking only at Maya Vance, his analytical mind reeling. He saw not the waitress, but the tactical genius who had dismantled a complex scheme in less than 90 seconds. He had found a pattern in her competence, a signature move of unparalleled precision. Julian rose slowly, his chair scraping back on the floor, and his voice was no longer cold, but laced with profound, dawning realization. It can't be, he whispered, stepping out from behind his table, his eyes wide. Maya Vance. No, Maya Vance, the iron hand of Sterling Corporation. The corporate fixer who vanished 2 years ago? The stunned silence that followed Julian Thorne's identification of Maya Vance was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic, shallow gasps of Mr. Marcus. Every remaining patron, every server, and most importantly, Chloe, stared at the woman who had just performed a masterclass in corporate forensic dismantling while wearing a bistro apron. Julian didn't wait for confirmation. The realization was its own proof. He stepped fully into the light, his previous coldness replaced by a focused, desperate intensity. It is you, he confirmed, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. The Iron Hand, the legend. 2 years ago, you cleaned up the Alvarez merger after the entire legal team collapsed. You were the corporate fixer everyone talked about, the one who saw patterns in chaos, the one who vanished after the Sterling Corporation scandal. You specialized in integrity audits. Why, for the love of shareholder value, are you here serving dessert wine? Marcus, seeing his last lifeline vanish, finally found his voice, high-pitched and hysterical. I didn't know, Mr. Thorne. She's a liar, a disgruntled former executive. She's trying to manipulate you. She's dangerous. I was just protecting the inventory." Julian didn't even glance at Marcus. He fixed his gaze on Maya, his attention solely on the truth he had hunted. "You tore up $50,000 to protect a friend, yet 2 years ago, you walked away from a 7-figure annual salary and the top spot at the most cutthroat firm in the city. Why?" Maya's shoulders finally slumped, the performance over. The lie of the simple waitress was destroyed. "I left, Mr. Thorne, because the integrity audits started hitting too close to home." She met his eyes, the anger in hers deep and years old. "My last job at Sterling was covering the acquisition of Aperture Technologies. My report showed that the acquisition was structured to knowingly bankrupt the smaller company's founders, leaving hundreds of low-level employees and their families with nothing, while the executives made a fortune. I refused to sign off. I blew the whistle internally." Her voice trembled for the first time, laced with deep bitterness. "My reward? I was blacklisted. My professional reputation was shredded. I was called unstable. Sound familiar, Mr. Marcus?" Marcus whimpered. "I chose poverty and anonymity over participating in the destruction of innocent lives." Maya finished, her voice rising with quiet force. "I chose honest work over corruption. I learned that the one thing a billionaire like you can never truly own is your own conscience." The quiet in the Onyx bistro was absolute. The staff, including Chloe, who had stopped crying, now looked at Maya with awe. Julian Thorne, the cold, powerful CEO, looked utterly defeated. "So, you ran." He concluded softly. "I didn't run," Maya corrected, her chin lifting. "I was purged. I was warned to keep quiet, threatened with libel suits, and then I simply disappeared. Until tonight." She looked directly at Julian's torn check. "The truth is, Mr. Thorne, I knew you were running a test, and I knew what you were looking for, and I knew you'd find me one way or another. Because people like you always find people like me when you need the truth." Julian stepped closer, his demeanor changing from inquisitor to desperate conspirator. He put a gentle, steadying hand on Maya's arm, his eyes pleading. "You're right. I need the truth, Maya. I need you. This whole night wasn't about testing my server's loyalty. It was about finding a single, completely incorruptible individual." He looked around the bistro, his eyes filled with genuine anxiety. "I'm being forced out, Maya. My own board at Aureus Global is trying to strip me of control. They're running dirty deals and covering up massive ethical breaches, the same kind of mess you walked away from. I need a COO, an honest outsider, someone with your precise surgical focus, to clean house from the inside before they destroy my company and my reputation." He looked at the defeated figure of Marcus, then back to Maya. "I offered $50,000 to fire a friend because I needed to know what your actual value system was. I needed a hero who couldn't be bought. I don't want you to work for me, Maya. I need you to save me." The proposition hung between Maya and Julian Thorne, not a job offer, but a lifeline thrown across a chasm of corporate deceit. Mr. Marcus, still trembling and defeated, had sunk into a nearby chair, forgotten. Chloe, silent and wide-eyed, was the only witness. Julian had laid bare his own vulnerability, his empire threatened by the very corruption he had built it to despise. "I need you to save me," he repeated, the phrase stripped of the arrogance he had worn earlier. "My board is trying to leverage a 5-year-old accounting error, a minor thing I fixed, to claim a failure of fiduciary duty. They want to take control and push through a series of acquisitions that are, and I know this because I ran the preliminary audits myself, structurally fraudulent. It's Sterling Corporation all over again, but this time, the rot is inside my own company, Aureus Global." Maya looked from Julian to Chloe, the terror in her friend's eyes slowly giving way to awe. The contrast was stark. The most feared CEO in the city was begging for help from a woman whose biggest worry moments ago was a 49-degree Chardonnay. Maya's own internal audit, running at full speed, analyzed Julian's request. He wasn't offering her a job in the traditional sense. He was offering a war. You need a chief operating officer who can bypass your board, secure your internal systems, and then dismantle the infrastructure of the fraud without collapsing the entire company. Maya stated, her voice purely professional. That's not a job. That's a hostile takeover of your own firm, and your board will fight you with everything they have. They'll ruin you. They'll ruin me anyway, Julian countered, stepping closer. But with you, I have a chance. Someone who can't be bought, who sees the data, not the drama. I offered you $50,000 to sell out your friend. You tore it up. That's the only metric that matters to me now. Maya finally allowed a faint smile, acknowledging the truth of his assessment. You're right, I can do it. I can stabilize your operations, expose the board's maneuvering, and put Aureus Global on a foundation of genuine integrity. But my terms are non-negotiable, Mr. Thorne. They aren't about salary, they are about principle. Julian nodded eagerly. Name them. Maya turned and looked directly at Mr. Marcus, who whimpered. First, Mr. Marcus is fired. Not for the wine, but for gross moral misconduct and repeated hostility towards staff. His termination must be public, immediate, and must include a full audit of his tip disbursements. Done, Julian said instantly, pulling out his phone. He dictated an email to his human resources head, bypassing Marcus entirely. Second, Maya continued, turning her attention to Chloe. You will acquire the Onyx Bistro, not to shut it down, but to secure the jobs of the loyal staff here who have suffered under his management. The acquisition will be done through a transparent holding company that invests in employee welfare and training. Chloe is to be immediately promoted to front-of-house manager with guaranteed funding for a 1-year business management and ethics course. Julian raised an eyebrow, momentarily surprised by the sheer altruism of the demand, but agreed immediately. Consider the bistro acquired, and Chloe enrolled. What is the third term, the one for Maya Vance? The third term, she said, her voice dropping to an almost reverent tone, is for the Iron Hand herself. She stepped toward Chloe, who was now staring at her in disbelief. The stolen wine bottle still resting on the floor. Maya placed a hand gently on her best friend's shoulder. I accept the role of COO, effective immediately. I will save Aureus Global and help Julian establish the most ruthlessly ethical corporate structure in the world. But my final condition is this. I will not draw a single dollar in salary or bonus until every employee at Aureus Global, from the janitor to the junior analyst, receives a full, transparent audit of their compensation to ensure they are being paid a fair, living wage without gender or racial disparity. We fix the foundation of his company before I profit from the structure. The quiet that followed was different from the previous tense silences. This one was profound. Chloe burst into fresh tears. This time, tears of overwhelming relief and gratitude, burying her face in Maya's shoulder. The remaining staff, who had been listening to the entire exchange, gasped, then began to applaud, a slow, building recognition of the justice they had just witnessed. Julian Thorne, the billionaire who had tried to buy loyalty, stood watching the scene. His own eyes, usually dry and calculating, were wet, the unexpected depth of Maya's integrity hitting him with the force of an emotional tsunami. He had come to the Onyx Bistro to test a theory about human corruption, and he left having discovered the one true incorruptible asset in the world, a friend who valued a person's dignity over $50,000. The tears of the staff, the triumph on Chloe's face, and the quiet dignity of Maya Vance left the restaurant in a state of shared, overwhelming emotion. Julian, humbled and saved, simply nodded to Maya, acknowledging that he had just acquired the most valuable chief operating officer in the world, not with money, but with a plea for truth. 6 months later, the transformation of both Maya Vance and Aureus Global was absolute, and their partnership had become the subject of business legend. The narrative of the waitress who saved the billionaire had been reduced to a simple, inspiring headline, but the reality was the grueling, meticulous work of two brilliant minds, united by a common moral compass. Maya now stepped out of a private Aureus Global helicopter onto the polished rooftop helipad of the Thorn Tower, the building named after Julian's grandfather. Gone was the black polyester uniform of the Onyx Bistro, replaced by a tailored charcoal suit that fit her like a second skin. Her demeanor, however, hadn't changed. The ruthless efficiency remained, but it was now directed at building, not just fixing. She was the chief operating officer, the iron hand brought in from the cold, and she was doing exactly what she promised. Julian Thorn stood waiting, no longer the icy, transactional CEO, but a humbled, intensely focused partner. The early months had been a corporate bloodbath. Using the specific forensic data Maya had brought with her from her previous life and the new insights she gained at Aureus, they had identified and dismantled the corrupt internal faction on the board. The hostile acquisitions were stopped, the fraudulent accounting structures were exposed, and the former board members were facing criminal charges for securities fraud. The company had taken an initial hit in the stock market, facing the temporary scrutiny that comes with corporate scandal. But Julian's transparent, decisive action, backed by Maya's relentless integrity, had ultimately won the day. Investors, tired of risk and deceit, respected the new Aureus Global commitment to ruthless ethics. The second phase of Maya's plan, her non-negotiable condition, was well underway. The global compensation audit was nearing completion, and Julian had just signed off on the restructuring of over 700 contracts worldwide, correcting years of subtle systemic wage inequality. Maya had yet to draw a salary, living off the modest savings she had earned serving food, a fact that both baffled and impressed Julian daily. As they walked towards the executive suite, Julian spoke, his tone filled with genuine admiration. The analysts are calling it the Vance effect. Our stock is up 20%, not because of market speculation, but because our financial reports are the most transparent in the sector. You didn't just save my company, Maya. You redefined its soul. Maya smiled, a rare, genuine expression of satisfaction. It wasn't just me, Julian. You gave me the authority, and the market always rewards integrity in the long run. We simply accelerated the process. The physical intimacy between them remained strictly professional, but the intellectual and ethical bond was profound, a shared trust built on the bedrock of the $50,000 test. They had become an unstoppable unit, two halves of a corporate conscience. Speaking of rewards, Julian said, pausing by the massive floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city, the final compensation audit is done. Your contract stipulates your salary starts now. I've calculated your back pay and bonuses, along with the acquisition and setup costs of the Onyx Bistro for Chloe. He turned to her, a small, genuine black velvet box in his hand. Maya's breath caught. She had expected the compensation package, but the sudden appearance of the velvet box was a direct hit to the personal side of the iron hand. This isn't about compensation, Julian clarified, his voice softening, anticipating her corporate rebuttal. This is personal. I came to that bistro thinking I could buy the truth, and you showed me that the truth is the most valuable, non-tradable asset there is. You also taught me that the only way to earn something is to prove you deserve it. He opened the box. Inside lay not a diamond, but a stunning platinum ring set with a brilliant dark blue sapphire, a jewel that matched the intense, ethical clarity of her eyes when she was in analysis mode. "I won't insult you with a job offer, Maya. You already run this company," Julian said, his eyes filled with a vulnerability he would never show in a boardroom. "So let's simplify the contract. Marry me. Be my partner in everything. I don't want to live or work in a world you're not in." Maya stared at the ring, then at Julian, remembering the terrified, tearful waitress in the Onyx Bistro 6 months ago who had chosen friendship over freedom. She had chosen integrity over wealth, and in doing so, she had won both. The irony was sweet, but the sincerity in Julian's eyes was real. "I'm not conventional, Julian," she whispered, her voice husky. "I know," he replied, a genuine smile finally lighting up his face. "That's why I chose a sapphire. It's rare, it's brilliant, and it's the exact color of your eyes when you're about to dismantle a corrupt financial structure." She laughed, a full, resonant sound that still felt new to her. "In that case, Mr. Thorne, I accept the merger." Julian scooped her up in an exuberant, spontaneous embrace, a powerful, emotional display that the CEO of Aureus Global would never have dreamed of making 6 months prior. He had found his truth and his love in the most unexpected place. Maya Vance's acceptance of Julian Thorne's proposal brought the central conflict of the story, loyalty versus wealth, to its final, satisfying resolution. The quiet, profound moment on the Thorne Tower helipad was the true climax of their personal story, but the resolution needed a final, communal witness. The wedding itself was a private, elegant affair, but the celebration was brought back to where it all began, the Onyx Bistro. Julian, following through on Maya's initial terms, had completed the acquisition of the restaurant. It was no longer the tense, toxic environment run by Mr. Marcus, but a thriving, employee-focused establishment. For their private celebration, they closed the bistro entirely, filling the now gleaming space with their few trusted friends and the core staff who had witnessed the drama unfold 6 months prior. The Onyx Bistro was unrecognizable. The old, chipped tables had been replaced with beautiful, custom wood, and the kitchen, now state-of-the-art, hummed with efficient, happy chefs. The most beautiful change was Chloe. She stood at the door, greeting guests, no longer the timid, tearful server, but the confident, smiling front-of-house manager. The training program Julian had funded was working, giving her the technical skill to match her innate kindness. Julian and Maya entered, Maya's sapphire catching the light. She was still wearing the same tailored suit, a deliberate choice to symbolize that she was still the Iron Hand, a partner of equal professional and moral standing. Julian was radiant, a man freed from the burden of his former cynical self. "To Chloe and the new Onyx Bistro," Julian toasted, raising his glass of Bordeaux, not the expensive kind, but a fine, mid-range vintage, a nod to their new focus on ethical value. "And to the greatest chief operating officer a man could ask for. She saved my company, she saved my soul, and she taught me that the only market that truly matters is the one built on integrity." Chloe, tears of genuine joy welling in her eyes, embraced Maya tightly. "You gave me everything, May," she whispered, pulling back. "You didn't just save my job, you gave me my future, and you didn't even take $1 for yourself." "I got my future too, Chloe," Maya replied, glancing at Julian. "Besides, my 3rd term, the salary audit, has paid off. Every employee at Aureus Global is now earning a minimum of $22 an hour worldwide. That is my bonus." The entire room erupted in applause, the cheers led by the bistro staff who had benefited from the new ownership. It was a communal moment of vindication. The poor, the loyal, and the abused had been seen, valued, and elevated by the woman who refused to be bought. A quiet moment settled as Julian and Maya prepared to cut a small, simple cake. Maya surveyed the room, the warmth, the laughter, the genuine happiness on Chloe's face as she commanded the room with newfound confidence. This, she realized, was what she had always wanted to fix: the corruption of the human spirit, not just the corporate balance sheet. Julian, sensing her reflection, squeezed her hand. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Thorne." Maya looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears, the tears of satisfaction that had replaced the tears of fear from that fateful night. "I was just thinking," she said, her voice filled with profound gratitude. "It took a $50,000 test to prove that the only thing I needed was the integrity I already had. And it took a ruthless billionaire to finally believe in it." Julian smiled, a genuine, humble smile that had replaced his corporate sneer. "And it took a waitress to show a CEO that you measure worth in loyalty, not dividends." He lifted the knife, and Maya placed her hand over his. As they cut the cake, a quiet moment passed between them, a silent promise to continue building their lives and their company on the firm foundation of ruthless ethics. The intimate celebration at the newly acquired and renovated Onyx Bistro continued, bathed in the soft, reclaimed glow of the gold and black decor. The wedding reception felt less like a party and more like a gathering of co-conspirators who had just won a grueling, ethical war. Chloe, the new front-of-house manager, was a portrait of blossoming confidence. She moved around the room, directing staff with the exact type of calm authority that Maya Vance had always modeled. Her tears of fear and shame were long gone, replaced by the occasional tear of joy that she quickly dabbed away before getting back to her duties. She was no longer afraid of a rogue wine bottle or a shouting manager. She had a powerful mentor and the institutional support of Aureus Global backing her personal growth. Julian watched the scene, a warm, proprietary satisfaction filling his face. He found Maya near the window, looking out at the city lights. He wrapped an arm around her, the platinum sapphire ring gleaming on her finger. "You look like you're performing a final audit," he teased, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I am," Maya confessed, leaning back against his strong, secure presence. "The Onyx Bistro is running at 100% efficiency. Profit margins are up 30%, and employee morale is excellent. The return on investment for the acquisition is exceeding projections." "Good. Now, audit the other part of your investment," Julian prompted. "The one you made 6 months ago when you tore up the check. Did you get a good return on that $50,000 worth of loyalty?" Maya turned to face him, her eyes searching his. "I got a phenomenal return. I got my best friend's dignity back. I got every Aureus Global employee a fair wage, and I got the most honest, ethical partner I could ever imagine." She paused. The weight of the last 6 months, the fight, the fear, the victory settling over her. "I also got the chance to prove that the Iron Hand isn't ruthless in the pursuit of profit, but in the pursuit of truth." Julian's face softened. "You proved it. You showed me that I was obsessed with the wrong kind of scarcity. I thought integrity was rare. You showed me it's simply expensive to maintain." The conversation was interrupted by Chloe, who rushed over with a small, framed photo. It was an unofficial staff photo taken shortly after the new ownership took over, featuring Maya, Julian, and the core bistro team. Chloe was holding the center spot, beaming. "A final toast, please," Chloe announced, holding the photo up proudly. "To the woman who showed us that integrity doesn't just pay the bills, it builds empires." As the laughter and cheers subsided, Chloe handed the framed picture to Maya. "I hope you don't mind, May. I want this to be the first thing every new employee sees." The moment everything changed. Maya took the frame, genuinely touched. "I love it, Chloe. You keep it right where everyone can see it." A few minutes later, Julian and Maya were preparing to leave. Julian had their private car waiting, but Maya asked him to delay. "There's one more thing." She took him to the back office, the cramped, small room that was once Mr. Marcus's domain of tyranny, now a clean, organized office for Chloe. Julian waited as Maya retrieved her old, oversized server bag from a high shelf. It was the same bag Mr. Marcus had tried to plant the wine in. From the bottom of the bag, Maya pulled out two separate items. The first was a worn, laminated name tag from her time at Sterling Corporation, engraved with her full professional name and title, Maya Vance, Director of Integrity Audits. The second item, taped neatly inside a folder, was a set of 4 pieces of paper, the 4 neatly torn pieces of the $50,000 check. Julian looked at the torn paper, a physical reminder of the day that changed everything. "You kept it," he observed quietly. "It's a reminder," Maya explained, running her finger over the torn edge. "The name tag reminds me of the damage I can inflict with my skills. The check reminds me of the cost of that damage. I kept both to remind me of the promise I made to myself when I walked away." Julian reached out, his hand gently covering hers. "The cost is covered, Maya. You paid the price for your conscience, and now you can stop auditing your own past. Aureus Global is your future. We are the new ethical standard." As they turned to leave, Julian paused at the door. "You know," he said, his voice thoughtful, "the market rewarded us for our transparency. But the real viral story wasn't the takeover, it was the waitress tearing up the check. People don't want to see a corporation win, they want to see loyalty win." Maya smiled, a knowing, radiant look. "The story wasn't about the money, Julian. It was about the worth." They exited the Onyx Bistro, hand in hand, stepping out of the warm light of their new beginning and into the crisp, clear night. They left behind not a restaurant, but a monument to ethical triumph and a reminder that sometimes the greatest reward is simply the right to look your friend in the eye. If this journey of Maya and Julian inspired you to stand your ground or reminded you that your worth is not for sale, please give this video a thumbs up and comment below with the hardest choice you ever made. It's your engagement that helps us share these crucial lessons. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because the next story might hold the exact solution you need for the problem you're facing right now. And finally, share this video with the person who needs to know that the integrity they uphold in the dark will eventually become the platform they stand on in the light. Thank you for watching.